I want to ask you, to investors, why should they care about Kothar Computing?
What I would say is that the future of computing and the future of technology is quantum. The most important barrier to building quantum computers and quantum technology today is strangely still on the classical computing side. Eventually it will jump over into hybrid computing, but for now it's the classical computing side. The quantum electronic design automation stack needs to be built if you want to push the community from scientific experiments to an industrial scale ecosystem solving real utility scale problems and realizing the full value of quantum tech. Kothar is the engine that allows you to unlock this. And the interesting thing about building the engine for quantum electronic design automation is it also double functions as an absolutely fantastic engine for the future of hybrid quantum classical computing. Kothar is going to have a high impact in a lot of different communities, and we're going to fundamentally change the way that scientists and engineers interact with computing and the types of projects that they are able to do. And so that's basically my pitch. It's to disrupt and reboot scientific computing and quantum computing.
I'm your host, Frank Dekker. Today's guest is Jonathon Riddell. Jonathon is building developer tools for quantum science. He's building a platform that lets researchers express many-body quantum models. Jonathon is also for many years active on YouTube, and there he's teaching quantum many-body physics problems. So with that, thank you, Jonathon, for being here, being a part of the show.
It's my pleasure.
First of all, could you give us a short introduction?
My background is I hold a PhD in quantum many-body physics. It sounds like we're going to dive into what that means today. And like for the listeners at home, what that means is that I'm very quantum computing could be thought of as like a subdiscipline of this community. And so it's a much broader, sort of up in the clouds view of problem sets in that space. And so my PhD is from McMaster University and the Perimeter Institute.
First of all, I want to know, how did you become the CEO of Kothar?
Kothar, yeah. So how did I become the CEO of Kothar? So when I finished my PhD, I went off to do a postdoc, and in between there's like a very specific pain point that I was thinking about, like in conjunction with my consulting. So along with quantum many-body physics, I'm an expert in high-performance computing to simulate these systems. And in some sense, these systems and this type of simulation, it's very hard, and it's one of the primary reasons why you want to build quantum computers. It's to simulate systems of many quantum particles, so you can simulate things like molecules or materials. And so when I came into my PhD, the type of physics that I wanted to simulate, there was really no packages to write anything. And if you wanted good performance, if you wanted to push the boundaries of a physical simulation, you needed to get down basically at the computer science level, write C++ code, learn, parallel computing frameworks and all of this stuff. So I spent my PhD writing probably 100,000 lines of code, like 5 years between my master's and my PhD. I then jumped across the Atlantic, across the pond, and I spent 2.5 years in Nottingham and Birmingham, working on, I kid you not, like an adjacent field. Like the questions that we were asking were identical, but the code that I had written in my PhD was just not applicable. Like there was a couple pieces that I could use. So my first project took me 30,000 lines of code to write, and so while I'm thinking about uh, what's the future of computing, it's hybrid computing, the classical workhorse, the engine's not really there. And then I'm also thinking that you're either making a choice like me, where you're basically becoming a computer scientist, a high performance computing developer to do your science, or you're not making that choice and you don't have good access to computational tools right now. Like that's the state of the quantum community. So I started toying around in my spare time with sort of building out a universal engine for these types.
Jonathon, why is that? Why are there no good tools available? So it is ridiculous that if you want to do to solve those problems, that you have to become a full-time programmer.
It is, but this is the accepted status quo. So if you want to do circuit emulation, companies like IBM, Intel, basically every quantum computing company has built really good tools for you to emulate what a quantum computer is doing. If you're in other niche areas, specific quantum material contexts and stuff like that, maybe someone in your community has built a semi-okay library that is like pretty efficient. But the vast majority of time, physicists, when we pull the community, most physicists get like one class in computation in their undergraduate degree, and then they're thrown into modern research. And modern research is not, some people are just doing math, some people are doing experiments, but a lot of modern research is just doing computation. And so you're asking people to learn on the fly whatever they need to learn at the time, basically. So this is the status quo, basically. So the finding that perfect match of someone that has the right computational background and has the right physics backgrounds to write these libraries, those people are really rare.
Yes, I can imagine.
And not every community has people dedicated to that space.
And to your point, if it would be easier, the pool of developers or the pool of researchers who could solve those problems would be much wider, because the barriers to entry would be much lower.
Yeah, exactly. And like the type of the speed of innovation, the speed of R&D would also go up significantly, right? Like this is what happened to the machine learning community. You know, a lot of the core libraries, PyTorch, TensorFlow, they're all written in C++, high performance computing code. They have GPU acceleration, backends, etc. But the vast majority of AI and machine learning developers, they don't code at that level. They code at an abstracted level inside Python. So you need tools that are designed from the ground up for your community, and then your community can innovate on top of them.
Can you explain what you want to achieve in the coming 5 years?
In the next 5 years, like our core goal right now is really unlocking what's called quantum electronic design automation, and tools surrounding like that context. So that is the sort of like the enterprise grade. What's our highest impact on the quantum community today, and that's giving them. It's kind of interesting, right? Like while we're trying to build quantum computers, I don't know if this is where you want me to go with this, but basically there's a fundamental classical computing bottleneck that you need to solve, that Kothar solves, to help scientists, focus on scientists and engineers just focus on building quantum computers rather than trying to write in-house simulations that allow them to see if what they're building is going to be optimal. So that's the big application goal. The other big goal is to become the de facto provider of scientific computing tools in the quantum, like in all quantum spaces. So that's you sort of like deep R&D research, like deep research in academia that doesn't have immediate applications, but that's also folks writing hybrid quantum classical computing algorithms on the platform as well.
That's clear. Thank you. What are the main battles that you have to win to achieve your goals? The two goals.
That's a good question. I mean, there's technical battles, there's business battles. Like I think a really interesting thing about the quantum space is that it's such a green space. Like it's not we don't have quantum computers yet at a utility scale that are solving real problems for research or industry. So one of the fundamental business challenges is figuring out how to integrate and monetize what you have and what type of monetization models are available and optimal for the growing community. Like this is a really interesting one. On the technology side, like what we're trying to solve is we're trying to give hardware providers the ability to basically effectively model, like, let's say 100 qubits. For example, the quantum dot or spin qubit context, that's beyond what they currently can build. In the superconducting qubit case, in other contexts, this is lower than what they can currently build, but it's beyond what they can currently simulate. So really, like capturing that physics at a high enough resolution is a hard computational job, but we feel like we have the right roadmap to achieve that in the next year or two.
Okay, and how are you going to do that?
That's a good question. So there's like two layers to quantum EDA that we really slide into. One is solving high resolution simulations of individual qubits, like really getting down to the dirty details of the quantum mechanics that's going on in those contexts. So just to preface this, we have a partnership basically with a company called Nano Academic. They build a product called QTCAD. And what they're able to do is they're able to build us realistic models of what's going on the chip. And so there's two layers to where we slide in. The first is modeling individual qubits, or maybe high resolution of like very small amount of qubits, but containing a lot of quantum information. And this is more or less, this is like a really, not to be super technical, but this is a very messy problem, because you basically have a lot of different things talking to a lot of different things. There's not a lot of structure to the problem, but with our tools, mixing symbolic computing with high performance, we're called exact diagonalization routines, we're basically able to, as far as I can tell, get the hardware providers to where they want to be already. When you zoom out and you look at the chip more from like an effective compact model perspective, then you're talking about advanced tensor network routines. But basically our solution is delivered through QTCAD or our partners' software. So it's a full stack development. It takes you from the fundamental physics layer all the way up to the effective model of your chip. And you can basically construct from, basic information about the thing that you want to build and on what material, realistic models of your chip, all the way up to the effective physics of your chip, fully capturing the quantumness of that chip.
Okay, let's park the technology a little bit. We come back to it. First, sure. I want to get to know you a little bit better, Jonathon. What are your fundamental beliefs that shaped you as a personality and your character?
Yeah, I think I think just going back to the beginning, I think the fundamental driver, why I was drawn to make my YouTube channel, why I was drawn to making Kothar, is that I fundamentally believe things can be a lot easier than they are. Basically, it's easy to get. It's possible to build tools or courses or material for people to get involved in advanced topics much faster than we are getting them involved in those topics, and it's possible to make those things very accessible for people. So this is the fundamental driver for me.
That sounds like solving a very big pain point. So that should be value add already. That sounds exciting. But can you then maybe, that's your fundamental, but do you have other examples or key beliefs? So one key belief is making it simpler and easier to access, and that you create value with that. And you've been practicing that for many years also with your YouTube channel. But what other key fundamental beliefs do you have that could help you running Kothar Computing?
Like, I'm also like a fundamental believer in things like division of labor and specialization and collaboration. So there's lots of content. Like, it's like you might want to ask the question, for example, who should be running the simulations and who should be building the simulations for quantum chip manufacturers. And to me, the natural answer to that is not the chip manufacturers, because they're hiring for expertise, a specific set of expertise to construct the hardware. They don't internally, typically, unless they have a lot of resources, have the resources to build a software stack that actually helps those folks. And then when you then go and also look at the software stack that these people should be importing to do that, you also have like different layers of it, right? So like there's a pre-existing EDA community. It's the reason why the classical chip community is as successful as it is. And so there's a lot of institutional knowledge going into, how could we actually model these chips, right? And it's just, basically we're going to succeed as a community if we collaborate and we build layers that talk to each other too, right? Like software orchestration is also a major bottleneck, making things speak to each other. So it's collaboration, it's integration, it's division of labor, and finding your niche and how you can help the community. And that goes all the way down to how we construct the team at Kothar. What type of division of labor we have, what type of generalists we hire, what type of specialists we hire.
What are can you give 3 lessons that you learned during your career or during your youth that really shaped your personality and your character?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I would say one of the lessons that I would find is that I would say is that leadership comes in all shapes and forms. In my principle, though, for engineers and researchers, the best type of leadership is something that approximates a flat structure with very obvious leadership coming from areas that people can respect and understand and can justify itself. Hopefully that's clear, but it's basically like, for example, in Kothar, to give you an example, the way we structure the team is it's more or less a flat structure. However, people have specific areas that they own. A lead high performance computing developer. If something's a matter of speed, he's the person he's the person that is like fundamentally in control of that conversation. And I think that's the big takeaway for at least running a company of our size. You can really unleash people onto problems if they have the time and space and ownership over the problems that they're developing on. I think Kothar's progress is quite remarkable for how young of a company we are and how ambitious of a scope that we're tackling with the amount of employees that we have. So that's definitely a big one. A second lesson is, yeah, I guess where would I want to take this? Like there's lots of lessons to be learned. Like I think like a big one is just to be uncomfortable and forcing yourself into situations. Like there's been many moments in Kothar's journey where it's like, is it I come from an academic background. One of the first things that I did that was uncomfortable was putting my face on a screen and putting myself out there on YouTube and just pushing through that, right? Because like the outcome and what you want from that experience is more important than the anxiety in those contexts. Like a lot of the anxiety that you have to not put yourself out there and push through the pain, it's not really real, right? And like in Kothar, it's the same thing. Like when we wanted to construct a list of beta users or we want to get out in front of a specific company, it's like it's okay to be shameless and just private message people on LinkedIn because that's what that platform is for, right? Like that's what it's for, and so it's okay to just start those conversations. Yeah, I would say those are the two big ones.
Okay, thank you. Could you walk us a little bit through how did your extensive movies on YouTube, how did it help you on in your network, building your network and your knowledge levels? Or were there totally different learnings, or are there obvious things that you say, okay, this is how it benefited me?
So the network is a really interesting one because I get recognized all the time. Like it's a niche channel. It's built for a niche community in physics. It has about 7,500 followers. And there's very famous physicists that have many more citations than I have. And it's very rare for a physicist to walk up to you and ask you for a selfie. It's only happened to me once, but like that's kind of like every conference I go to, people say, "Hey, you're Jonathan. I've seen your YouTube." It's happened in the context of venture capital firms that are interested in quantum. They hire physicists to do their due diligence, and those physicists have often like they know who I am. It also helps because like before I meet people, a lot of people Google me and then they see that I'm a nice guy and they come in with expectations for a friendly conversation. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, this is how we found our initial investors. We built that relationship over years of me consulting for them, and then they were the first money to come into Kothar to start building out like building out the solution to the problem that I wanted to solve.
So summarizing is starting the YouTube channel that really helped you to get recognized and building a brand, and it also
Yes.
brought venture capital on your path and helped you
Yes.
raising capital.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's quite cool. Jonathan, maybe let's dive a little bit into Kothar Computing. How would you describe Kothar Computing to people who don't know it in very basic terms?
Yeah. So Kothar is building developer tools for scientists and engineers to solve cutting edge problems in quantum technology in the quantum technology space. So that's building it's essentially trying to build the Google workspace from data generation to publication or patent for cutting edge topics in quantum science and technology.
And why did you focus on research and on academic research specifically?
So I wouldn't say that we were focused on academic research in particular. I would say that we started the company wondering what our first application space would actually be. When we were thinking about the early, who's our customer, who's the person that we want to use these tools, there's a very large community of material scientists and condensed matter physicists, basically people responsible for all the cutting edge innovations in electronics, materials, like all of those spaces. And Kothar was really it's a passion project that's really motivated by the pain I felt as being a part of that community. And then the question that we had in the early days was it's not really a question of will this be industrially relevant. It is what community will we choose first to help, and who has the most pressing need for tools like this. And so there's a lot of context where people want to develop hybrid algorithms for a variety of contexts, molecular simulation for drug discovery, tons of questions in material science, but the quantum computers aren't really there. The fun, like, I guess the entry point and the best place for our tools to start being useful was the quantum EDA space. Yeah, I guess the summary is not specifically focused on researchers, but to us, they're kind of the fundamental building blocks. This is where a lot of innovation comes out of. This is where the new technologies come out of. This is where new algorithms will come out of for quantum computing. And so they're kind of a foundational tool that, or like not a tool, but a foundational community that drives towards industrial applications.
Okay, that's clear.
The maybe the easiest thing to understand about the issues with Python is that there's no strong typing. And what that means is that if I declare a variable x and I set it equal to an integer, I can just change its type. And this is I can change it into a real number, or I could change it into a string, or I can change it into whatever I really want. And this makes compatibility with compilers in particular. Like the way Python is designed is it will never be a compiled language. And then the extra difficulty is because there's so many people in there, people are saying, okay, well, what if I write like a domain specific language? Maybe I write something that's like a subset of Python, like Numba, for example, and I compile code with Numba. And the question that I ask myself is like, do I want my developer to be an expert in physics, or do I want my developer to spend 6 months of their PhD trying to figure out how to optimize Python code that you would never have to optimize in the same way in another ecosystem if it was developed for them. So we call this internally, and other folks talk about it's kind of like the software orchestration. The Python ecosystem is so vast and so complex. There's 3 to 5 libraries for every single little thing that you want to do, and sometimes they're not compatible. Different meshes and spider webs of libraries are compatible with each other. And why are we asking physicists at the cutting edge of science to make decisions about this? That doesn't really make sense to me, right? If I'm trying to build a quantum computer, why am I worried about if my NumPy package is compatible with some other package in or the version numbers are off and I don't know why my Python code isn't running? Like that's just it's a silly state of scientific computing software. And so Aleph backs away from the orchestration problem. The goal there is much wider. It is to say, like Python has all those orchestration problems just from the software perspective. Then if I'm developing on my laptop and then I plop it up on a supercomputing cluster, they might not have the packages that I installed, or their version numbers might be different, and the behavior might be slightly different, or the performance might be slightly different. And at that level, you're also asking scientists to figure out how to coordinate files between potentially different supercomputing cluster, their local resources. You're asking them to figure out SSH. You're asking them to figure out scheduling and distributing, requesting resources on scientific computing clusters. And Kothar's answer is, this is silly. Like, we talk to other people that are worried about the orchestration problem, and their solution is to try and make something that collects all of the mess and pushes it together, and they try to make it their mess rather than someone else's mess, right? But Kothar's answer is, why don't we just step aside and say, let's take all the good pieces, let's build something that's as easy to use as what people are already attracted to, and build it from the ground up with the modern compute landscape. In the language solves the ease of use problem, it solves the performance problem, It also integrates with C++, which is where all the momentum from the HPC community is coming from. It's in C++. So it's designed to take advantage of that. And then on top of that, you slap it into a platform called the Workshop that handles, hook our app into your different computers. We kind of sit on your computer like we're the Dropbox app in the bottom right hand corner, and then wherever you log on, you can submit jobs to the compute resources you have access to. If you need to install drivers for your GPU, we handle that for you. It's completely removing the need to worry about all of the things that like plague modern scientific computing research and completely derail research with software problems.
What excites you about quantum EDA, and can you describe your vision and the basics of quantum EDA?
The thing that excites me about quantum EDA is that I think that this is the most important scientific computing task humanity is facing right now, because we're pumping billions of dollars into the quantum industry. And like, I don't want to be provocative, but for all intents and purposes, we're still at the scientific experiment layer. This isn't an engineering field. This is an industrial scale industry. And part of the reason for that is that the EDA tools that come from the classical space, they're not actually capturing. So
like Synopsys and Cadence, you mean?
Yeah, Synopsys, Cadence, Ansys, these types of folks, those tools are not designed to capture the quantum physics that go into these devices, right? Like at the end of the day, the most important components of those devices are quantum components. And so in some sense, the tools that people are using to design these chips, they run some simulations on software, and then they go hand it over to a fab, and you print off your chip. In the silicon and superconducting case, they are blind to the types of physics that actually will give them like their industrial relevance, right? The quantum components aren't actually being modeled, right? Yeah, it sounds silly. It sounds silly, right? But like that's basically what's going on, and we've made frankly incredible progress by not modeling the things that are the core drivers of the value of the technology. And if we want to turn this from a scientific experiment that it's going really well, like getting into the hundreds of qubits, it's remarkable of where we've come, but fundamentally you want to turn this into a community that can boot up a top to bottom simulation suite that can just allow an engineer to go in there and try new ideas and figure out how they want to design their quantum chip that fully captures all of the physics that matters for the technology that they're designing. You want to stop the problem of them being basically blind to. Blind is maybe like a too harsh of a thing. There's lots of things going on. There are things that we're capturing that are important, but at the end of the day, like, if you're not fully modeling the physics that you care about, you're missing like a large amount of things that you should be aware of before you commit to going into the lab.